When my in-laws went on vacation, they left me with their son's mess-so-I-cleaned house. The coffee mug slipped from Jessica's fingers when Brandon dropped his bombshell. Not literally, though maybe that would have been better than watching dark liquid spread across their kitchen table, while her husband casually announced he'd be handling things for his parents. Bob and Linda were finally taking their dream cruise. 25th wedding anniversary, 2 weeks in the Caribbean, something they'd saved for since, well, forever. And somehow, Brandon had convinced them he was responsible enough to manage their affairs while they were gone. Brandon, the same guy who forgot to pay our electric bill last month and blamed the power company for not sending reminders. Don't look at me like that, Jess. He was already reaching for his PlayStation controller. It's not rocket science. Water some plants, grab the mail, easy money. Easy money. That phrase always made my stomach clench, because with Brandon, easy money usually meant someone else would pay the hard price later. My phone lit up with a text from Linda. So grateful Brandon volunteered to help. He's such a thoughtful son. Yeah, thoughtful. 3 days into Bob and Linda's cruise, I drove past their house on my lunch break, just checking. The newspapers were stacked up like a miniature white tower on their front porch, and their garbage cans were still sitting by the curb from Tuesday pickup. My chest tightened. Brandon had exactly one job. When I got home that evening, his truck wasn't in the driveway. Instead, there was a post-it note stuck to our microwave. Vegas baby, Tyler's bachelor party, back Sunday, don't be mad, love you. Don't be mad, right. I grabbed the spare key Linda had pressed into my palm, just in case anything happens, and drove back to their house. The front door stuck, humidity always made it swell, and when I finally got inside, the smell hit me first. Stale pizza and something else. Something wrong. Their pristine living room looked like a fraternity house after rush week. Empty soda bottles on Linda's handmade doilies. Pizza crusts ground into the carpet she'd shampooed before leaving. And on her antique side table, the one from her grandmother, a perfect circular burn mark where someone had set down something hot. My hands started shaking. The kitchen was worse. Dishes piled in the sink with something green growing on them. Coffee grounds scattered across Linda's white countertops like dirt. The dishwasher hung open, racks pulled out and abandoned mid-load. But it was Bob's study that made me physically sick. His desk drawer was hanging open, checkbook visible inside. 3 check stubs were missing from the sequence, and the ones that remained showed Brandon's sloppy handwriting where Bob's careful script should have been. Not even close to his father's signature, just Brandon's regular scrawl with some extra loops thrown in. I sank into Bob's leather chair, the same one where he'd helped me with my taxes every year since Brandon and I got married. The same man who'd slipped me grocery money when Brandon lost his first job and was too proud to tell me. My phone rang. Linda's contact photo, her beaming smile from last Christmas, filled the screen. Jessica, how's everything at home? We're having the most wonderful time. The lie rolled off my tongue like I'd been practicing it. Everything's perfect, Linda. Brandon's taking such good care of things. I knew we could count on him. We raised him right, you know. After hanging up with Linda, I sat in Bob's chair for maybe 20 minutes, just staring at those mutilated check stubs. Then I opened his computer. Password was Linda's birthday, because Bob was exactly that kind of sweet, predictable man, and pulled up his online banking. The numbers told the story. Brandon's forged signatures had started. 4 withdrawals over the past 2 weeks, totaling almost $5,000. All from ATMs around town, all just under the daily limit so they wouldn't trigger alerts. This wasn't some impulse decision. Brandon had been planning this Vegas trip for weeks, systematically draining his parents' account to fund it. I took pictures of everything, bank statements, forged checks, the house damage. Then I started cleaning, because letting Linda come home to this disaster felt like a special kind of cruelty. While I scrubbed dishes and vacuumed pizza crumbs, something hardened in my chest. Not anger exactly, more like clarity. For 3 years I'd been Brandon's cleanup crew, his excuse factory, his soft place to land when his easy money schemes blew up. Not anymore. My phone buzzed, hit the big win, literally. This is our lucky break, babe. I deleted the text without responding. Friday morning I called Hendricks Construction, Brandon's current employer. I'd never talked to his supervisor before, but Jerry sounded like a straight shooter when I explained I was trying to reach my husband about a family situation. Family situation? That's weird, because Brandon's been out sick all week. Stomach illness, he said. Sounded pretty rough on the phone. My heart dropped into my shoes. I see. When did he call in? Tuesday morning. Said he'd probably need the whole week to recover. More lies. Always more lies with Brandon. Jerry, I need to tell you something. Brandon isn't sick. He's in Las Vegas, spending recklessly, while he's supposed to be taking care of his elderly parents' house. The silence stretched so long I thought the call had dropped. Then, well, hell, I'm real sorry to hear that, Mrs. Martinez. We can't have people lying about sick leave. When Brandon comes back, he won't have a job waiting. Good. One less safety net for him to abuse. That afternoon, I sat in First National's branch office, spreading evidence across loan officer Patricia Wong's desk like tarot cards, predicting a very bad future. Patricia examined the forged checks with the intensity of a jeweler appraising diamonds. This is serious, Mrs. Martinez. We're talking about elder fraud, forgery, multiple felonies. I know, but I don't want charges filed until his parents return. They deserve to hear this from me, not from police officers showing up at their door. Patricia nodded slowly. That's actually very thoughtful. We'll freeze the account immediately and reverse these fraudulent transactions. Mr. and Mrs. Chen won't lose any money, and we'll issue new account numbers. Walking back to my car, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years: control. Not the illusion of control I'd maintained by enabling Brandon's chaos, but actual, genuine agency over my own life. My phone showed 15 missed calls from Brandon. I powered it off and drove to Restoration Station to ask about Linda's damaged table. The owner, an older black man named Samuel, handled the piece like it was made of spun glass. "Burn mark goes deep," he said, tracing the damage with one finger. "But I can save her. Take about 2 weeks, cost around $700. Worth every penny though, this is real craftsmanship." "Fix it," I said without hesitation. "Whatever it takes." That evening I sat in Bob and Linda's restored kitchen, their bills paid and organized in neat stacks, their house once again worthy of Linda's pride. Everything looked normal on the surface, but underneath I was systematically dismantling Brandon's ability to cause this kind of destruction again. I'd opened my own bank account that afternoon, transferred half our savings. If Brandon wanted to gamble away his future, that was his choice, but he wouldn't take me down with him. The divorce papers arrived by email from the attorney I'd consulted during my lunch break. As I printed them, my hands stayed steady despite the magnitude of what I was doing. My phone finally rang, Brandon calling from whatever resort had become his temporary home. I answered on the 4th ring. His voice was thick with alcohol and adrenaline, background noise of game machines creating a soundtrack for his rambling monologue about winning streaks and life-changing big win. He talked for 5 straight minutes without taking a breath, painting pictures of our debt-free future funded by his system. When he finally paused, I spoke into the silence. "Your parents' account is frozen. The bank has evidence of your forgery. Jerry fired you for lying about sick leave. And I filed for divorce this afternoon." The phone went so quiet I could hear Brandon's breathing. Then he exploded, denials tumbling over threats, tumbling over desperate bargaining. He'd pay everything back, he'd get help. I was overreacting, I was destroying our marriage over nothing, I was crazy, I was selfish, I was. "No, Brandon," I said, when he finally ran out of steam. "You destroyed our marriage. I'm just making it official." I hung up and blocked his number, then called the cruise line to leave a message for Bob and Linda. Their son was having some personal difficulties, I explained. Nothing life-threatening, but they might want to consider cutting their vacation short. They called back within hours, voices tight with parental worry. What kind of difficulties? Was Brandon hurt? Should they fly home immediately? "He's not injured," I assured them. "But there are some financial irregularities that need immediate attention. I think it would be better if we discussed this in person." Linda's voice cracked. Financial irregularities? What does that mean? It means Brandon has made some very poor choices, and you deserve to hear about them from someone who cares about you. They'd be home in 3 days. I used the time to pack Brandon's belongings and move them into a storage unit. Whatever happened next, I wouldn't be sharing space with him anymore. Bob and Linda's Uber pulled up just as I was transferring their neighbor's borrowed newspaper cart back to his garage. They looked exhausted, still wearing resort clothes, but with the haunted expressions of people who'd spent 48 hours imagining worst-case scenarios. Linda practically ran across their lawn to hug me. "Jessica, sweetie, what's going on? We've been worried sick." I led them inside to their living room, where I'd arranged the evidence on their coffee table like prosecutors' exhibits. Bank statements, photocopies of forged checks, pictures of the house damage, Brandon's termination letter from Hendricks Construction. "I need to tell you some things about Brandon," I began, surprised by how steady my voice sounded. "And I need you to know that none of this reflects on how you raised him. Some people just make bad choices despite having good parents." Bob picked up the first bank statement, his engineer's mind immediately processing the numbers. His face went gray as he recognized his own routing information but someone else's spending patterns. Linda gasped when she saw the photos of her grandmother's table, her hand flying to cover her mouth. "How much?" Bob asked quietly. $4,800 over 2 weeks. But the bank reversed everything, so you haven't lost any money." Linda's tears came silently, tracking down her cheeks as she stared at proof of her son's betrayal. Bob stood abruptly and walked to their picture window, his reflection ghost-like in the glass. "Where is he now?" Linda whispered. "Flying back from Las Vegas. He doesn't know I've told you anything yet." Bob turned from the window, looking like he'd aged a decade during our conversation. "Why didn't you call us immediately? Why handle this alone?" I'd rehearsed this answer. "Because you deserve to enjoy your anniversary trip after 25 years of marriage. And because I needed to understand the full scope of Brandon's actions before I could explain them properly." I handed Linda the divorce papers, and her tears started falling harder. "I'm leaving him. But I want you to know this decision has nothing to do with you. You've been wonderful to me. Brandon's choices are his responsibility, not yours." Linda reached across their coffee table to squeeze my hand, her wedding ring warm against my palm. "You could have just walked away. Let us come home to discover this nightmare ourselves." "Why did you clean it up?" The answer surprised me with its simplicity. "Because your family, real family, protects each other, even when it's hard." Brandon's headlights swept across their front window an hour later. I watched through the curtains as he climbed out of his truck, Vegas luggage in hand, moving with the loose confidence of someone who thought he'd gotten away with something. He tried our duplex first, confused when his key didn't work. I'd changed the locks that morning. Then he noticed his parents' car in their driveway, his step faltering as reality began to penetrate his resort-fueled optimism. Bob opened their front door before Brandon could knock, stepping aside without a word of greeting. Brandon's eyes found me immediately, and I watched his expression cycle through surprise, confusion, and growing panic as he processed the scene. "Mom? Dad? What are you doing home early? Did something happen on the ship?" "Sit down, son," Bob said, his voice carrying the authority of 30 years managing construction crews. Brandon perched on the edge of their sofa, his Vegas swagger evaporating as he noticed the evidence spread across the coffee table. His eyes kept darting between his parents' grim faces and the damning paperwork. "I can explain everything." "No explanations," Bob cut him off. "Just consequences." Bob went through each piece of evidence methodically, his engineer's precision making Brandon's crimes sound even worse in their clinical recitation. Forged signatures, elder fraud, employment fraud, theft of trust. Brandon's responses followed his usual script: denial, minimization, blame shifting. It wasn't that much money. He'd planned to pay it back. Everyone was overreacting. This was just a misunderstanding that had gotten out of hand. Each excuse fell flatter than the last. Linda spoke for the first time since Brandon had arrived, her voice barely audible. "The money isn't what hurts, son. It's knowing you could look at us and see." "What? A bank to rob? Parents whose trust meant so little you could throw it away for wasting money? I watched Brandon cycle through his greatest hits: Victim Playing, False Promises, Crocodile Tears. But something was different this time. His audience wasn't buying it. The evidence was too clear, the betrayal too complete. "I have a problem," Brandon finally admitted, his voice small. "I need help." "Yes, you do," Bob agreed. "And you'll get it. But because you choose to, not because we're forcing you. There's a difference." Brandon's desperate eyes swung to me, perhaps hoping for familiar support, but found only cool assessment. I slid the divorce papers across the coffee table, the sound sharp in their quiet living room. "I'm done being your safety net," I said simply. "You'll be served officially next week, but I wanted you to hear it from me first." For the first time, Brandon seemed to grasp the full scope of his situation. His parents' disappointment he could weather; he'd weathered it before. But losing me meant losing his cleanup crew, his excuse machine, his partner in denial. "Jess, please, I'll change, I'll get help, I'll do whatever." "You'll do those things for yourself," I interrupted, "if you choose to, but not for me. I'm not responsible for managing your recovery anymore." Brandon turned to his parents with desperate eyes, but Bob shook his head. "Your wife showed more integrity in 1 week than you've shown in years. She protected us when you betrayed us. We support her decision completely." The weight of complete abandonment seemed to crush Brandon's remaining bravado. He buried his face in his hands, shoulders shaking with what might have been sobs or rage. I stood to leave, my business here finished. This wasn't my family anymore. It was the family I was choosing to protect by stepping away from it. Linda rose with me, pulling me into an embrace that smelled like her familiar lavender perfume and something newer, the salt of tears. "Thank you," she whispered against my ear. "For everything. For protecting us. For handling this with such grace. You'll always be our daughter, regardless of what happens with Brandon." Bob's handshake was firm and grateful, his eyes conveying appreciation too deep for words. I'd saved them from financial ruin and emotional devastation, handling both with more maturity than their own son had ever demonstrated. At their front door, I paused. Brandon remained slumped at the coffee table, finally forced to confront the wreckage of his choices without anyone to blame but himself. "I hope you get the help you need," I said quietly. "And I hope you learn to value what you have before you lose everything." Brandon didn't look up. I walked back to what used to be our shared duplex and began packing what was left of a life I was ready to leave behind. The apartment felt hollow now, like a movie set after filming wrapped. Tomorrow I'd start looking for my own place. Tonight, I'd sleep in the guest room and dream of futures that didn't include cleaning up someone else's messes. 2 months later, I stood in my new apartment's kitchen, unwrapping the last of my dishes while morning sunlight streamed through windows that were finally, completely mine. Samuel had delivered Linda's restored table the week before, and it was more beautiful than ever, the wood grain enhanced, not diminished, by surviving its trial by fire. Kind of like me, I thought. Bob and Linda visited regularly, bringing homemade cookies and updates on Brandon's progress. He'd entered counseling and found work with a smaller construction company, though rebuilding their trust would take years. They were learning painful lessons about the difference between helping and enabling. Over coffee in my bright new kitchen, Linda asked the question that had been weighing on all our minds. "Do you think we failed him somehow? Made him think he could take without giving back?" I considered my answer carefully, wanting to be honest without adding to their pain. I think we all learned that love isn't the same as protection from consequences. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is step back and let someone face the truth about their choices. Linda nodded slowly, understanding flickering in her eyes. Through my kitchen window, the future stretched ahead. Uncertain but honest, challenging but mine. 6 months after Brandon's world collapsed, I ran into him at the grocery store. He looked smaller somehow. Thinner, with new lines around his eyes and clothes that actually fit instead of the expensive stuff he used to buy on credit. "Jess." He stopped his cart, blocking my path down the cereal aisle. "How are you?" "I'm well, Brandon. You look different." 93 days sober, From spending recklessly, I mean. Going to meetings. He shifted his weight, uncomfortable. I know you probably don't want to hear this, but I'm sorry. For everything. You deserved better. I studied his face, looking for the manipulation I'd grown so good at detecting, but this felt different, quieter, real, maybe. I'm glad you're getting help, I said finally. I really am. My parents, they're talking to me again, slowly. Your idea, them making me earn their trust back instead of just giving it. That wasn't my idea, Brandon. That was them learning to love you better. He nodded, understanding more than he used to. Yeah, I get that now. We stood there for a moment, two people who used to share everything and now shared only a complicated history. Take care of yourself, I said, meaning it. You too, Jess. You deserve all the good things. As I watched him walk away, I felt something I hadn't expected. Hope, not for us, that ship had sailed and sunk, but for him. For the possibility that sometimes people really could change if they wanted it badly enough. I finished my shopping and drove home to my sunny apartment where no one's problems but my own were waiting for me.